I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, a Palestinian attempts to stab a group of Israeli soldiers. The U.S. is putting pressure on Hezbollah, and we'll reveal what Radiohead had to say against BDS during their performance last night in Tel Aviv. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. We open with the breaking news of the day. A Palestinian man has just been shot dead while attempting to stab Israeli soldiers outside the Tekoa settlement in the West Bank. Reportedly, dozens of Palestinians responded to the terrorist death by throwing rocks at Israeli soldiers in the area. The soldiers reportedly used tear gas on the rioters to disperse the crowd, and no soldiers were injured during the attack. For years, Israel has been saying that the United Nations peacekeeping forces in Lebanon have been doing nothing to prevent Hezbollah from rearming itself for its next war with Israel. And now it looks like U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, agrees. Haley held a meeting with the UN envoy for Lebanon, Sigrid Kaag, in anticipation of the UN Security Council meeting today. They were set to discuss how and if the UN peacekeeping force is fulfilling its directive. According to a statement put out by the U.S., Haley expressed alarm over the buildup of weapons by Hezbollah and stressed that the international community must apply more pressure on Hezbollah. Israeli intelligence believes that Hezbollah has over 100,000 missiles all across southern Lebanon in the basements of homes and hospitals. Iran has even constructed missile factories in Lebanon, according to Arabic media. In June, Haley went on a tour of the Israeli-Lebanon border with an IDF major general who got into a heated argument with the commander of UNIFIL over their failure to disarm Hezbollah. Late last night, the White House finally released a statement over the ongoing conflict at the Temple Mount compound, requesting that Israeli and Jordanian officials figure out a way to restore calm. Eyal TV's Aaron Porce is here with more on that story. Now, Aaron, why is the U.S. throwing its hat into the draw here?
Basically, the United States has seen itself as this peacekeeping, moderating force globally for a very long time. And in addition to that, especially in the Middle East and with Israel, where a lot of American interests lie. Now, add to that the fact that a peace plan in the Middle East is a major tenet, is a major facet of the Trump administration, then, this major feud on the Temple Mount makes that pretty much impossible, so that it makes it their business.
Well, let's check out your report for some more details.
The White House press office, in a statement released yesterday, said that the United States is very concerned about the tensions at the Temple Mount and that Jordan and Israel must come to a solution that assures public safety and the security of the site and maintains the status quo. Unfortunately, the current situation is anything but status quo. Status quo is where, among other things, there are no metal detectors at the compound's Muslim-only entrances, no security cameras, full control under the Jordanian Waqf, and no open prayer by any non-Muslims. The Waqf has called on Muslims to boycott the compound, and the PA incited a day of rage yesterday. The new security measures were installed in response to a terror attack last weekend, where 3 Israeli Arabs attacked a group of police officers, killing 2 of them. Despite the new security, though, Netanyahu sees no real issues, saying, quote, "We want to solve the crisis in the quietest way possible and to bring back the calm. We talk with the Arab world and we explain that there is absolutely no change to the status quo," end quote.
Okay. Joining us now in the studio with more on the unfolding clashes in Jerusalem is Dr. Le Kalman, a senior researcher at the National Institute for Counterterrorism in Herzliya. Thank you so much for coming in.
Hello.
So let's begin. These metal detectors that we're seeing the Israeli security forces build at the Muslim entrances of the Temple Mount, how do they change the status quo at the Temple Mount, if at all?
I don't think they change the status quo. They change perhaps the political atmosphere. The problem is that they are good for this situation in these days. But when we will have a full 100,000 people which come for the Friday prayer, I don't think they are useful. It can provoke incident, a huge incident. We had in Mecca in Saudi Arabia 2 years ago, 2,400 people were killed by a stampede because there was no possibility to enter a place at the Hajj. So I think I'm quite sure that the Prime Minister Netanyahu will decide this evening to dismantle the magnetometers.
Right, which is interesting because we're not hearing many people say that they think it's going to be ineffective. You're one of the first people.
I want to stress the hypocrisy of the Arab leaders, the Muslim leaders, because 4 weeks ago there was an attempt of a suicide bombing in Mecca, in the holy mosque of Mecca, and King Abdullah of Jordan condemned strongly this incident and also expressed solidarity with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, while he didn't say anything about a holy place of where there was a terrorist attack, and which is the responsibility of the Waqf under Jordanian rule.
Well, now, and didn't Saudi Arabia install metal detectors following that attack as well?
Even before, because a year ago there was an attempt, also suicide bombing, at Medina, the Prophet's Mosque. So you see that there's a lot of hypocrisy. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims are killed practically these years in mosques in Pakistan, Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and we don't hear anything from our
Well, now
Muslim
let's talk
leaders.
a little bit about how the United States is going to be more involved, in this specific issue. Do you think the U.S. is going to take more of a role in this issue?
I think they already mediated, and the Saudis probably passed some kind of message. And the Saudis, by the way, are very quiet about this incident, if you pay attention to it. So they are involved behind the scenes. I think they condemned strongly the incident. At the same time, they asked the two parts to be very cautious about the situation and try to achieve some kind of agreement.
Now, the Waqf is tasked with overseeing the rules of religious observance at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount compound. And Israel's tasked with security services. So doesn't Israel have the right to install these types of security measures in the first place?
Isn't it their duty?
Again, it's a very political decision. It's not only operational. Because of the very sensitive relationship between us and the Palestinian Authority and the Jordanian government, which are under threat by other internal problems, not only the issue of the Palestinian conflict. And so we must be careful not to take steps that can provoke such kind of if you want, not uprising, but violent manifestations. Again, here you see that the Muslim leaders in Israel, those of the in the Knesset, but also the Islamic movement, which is responsible for the incitement. In 2000, before the Second Intifada, they built an underground mosque, huge one, under the Al-Aqsa Mosque, practically endangering the construction itself of the mosque, without any exception from the Israeli authorities and even of the Waqf in Jordan. So there is a lot of hypocrisy and cynicism in the political attitude of the Muslim leaders in Israel and also in the Palestinian Authority.
Well, thank you for joining us, Dr. Le Kalman.
Thank you.
All right. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with the leaders of the V4 countries of Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic yesterday. And it looks like all of the countries are on the same page when it comes to radical Islam and the EU. Following his successful meeting with Netanyahu on Tuesday, the Hungarian Prime Minister praised Israel for its effect on the stability of the Middle East.
Az Európai Uniónak értékelnie kellene azokat az erőfeszítéseket, amelyeket Izrael állam tesz a térség stabilitása érdekében, és amely nem csak izraeli, hanem európai érdek is, mert véd bennünket az újabb és újabb migráns inváziótól.
It appears that Netanyahu is eager to cooperate with the Central European V4 countries on common threats.
I suggested that we have, as Prime Minister Orban said, a working group on how to work together to cooperate in this battle against terrorism, the spread of militant Islamic terrorism to the world. I believe that we can do a lot more together than separately.
Israel and the V4 don't just share security concerns, they also have shared values of democracy, free markets, and a general skepticism to the European Union. In fact, in a revealing moment, Netanyahu was caught on a hot mic sharing his thoughts on the EU with the V4 countries. He said that Europe has to decide if it wants to live and thrive or if it wants to shrivel and disappear, and asked for help from his new allies in moderating the EU's crazy policy toward Israel. Reportedly, the next V4 summit will not be in Central Europe, but in Israel. Here's some startling news in Jerusalem. The city's district court has been hearing the testimonies of Palestinians who were brutally tortured by the Palestinian Authority for being suspected collaborators with Israel. The court is ruling that the Palestinian Authority must pay compensation to the people it tortured between 1990 and 2003. Some of the plaintiffs were held for years, locked inside hot metal containers, had their teeth pulled out, and were even rendered sterile and impotent by genital torture. The ruling comes after 90 court sessions and many years of deliberations, and Israeli Judge Moshe Drori says the testimonies and evidence prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the allegations are true. Next, the court will look through every one of the 51 cases and determine how much each victim should be awarded as compensation for their years of torture. But according to one of the men who was tortured, that won't get him his life back. He says he's already lost it since he was arrested at the age of 18 or 19. He's been living in Israel alone and penniless since he was released. The Israeli Housing Ministry is now planning on offering public housing beyond the Green Line, and it's all in an effort to help low-income families while strengthening Israel's hold on Jerusalem. Housing Minister Gallant has just announced the move. The new apartments lie in many neighborhoods, including disputed areas like Pisgat Ze'ev and Neve Yaakov. Gallant is known for his belief in Jewish and Arab coexistence, having written op-eds for the New York Times on the subject and traveled to Arab-Israeli villages with the head of the Arab Joint List parties. It may be that this move will help to integrate Jerusalem, but it could also draw controversy from bodies like the UN and EU, which view Jewish expansion into disputed parts of Jerusalem as illegitimate. Recently, right-wing members of the government's coalition have been pushing a bill that would require the support of 2/3 of the Knesset to in any way divide Jerusalem in a future agreement with the Palestinians. The IDF soldier who shot dead a neutralized Palestinian terrorist in March of last year has been released to house arrest until the military court makes a final decision on his sentence. In January, Eyal Azaria was found guilty of manslaughter for shooting an incapacitated Palestinian attacker. But now that his military service has ended, he can no longer be confined to the military base where he was imprisoned for the last year. When he's under house arrest, Azaria will not be permitted to leave his family's house in Ramle, except for synagogue visits on Shabbat, and even then he must be accompanied by a family member. It looks like the Trump administration is joining in to back up a bill that would drastically cut U.S. funding to the Palestinian Authority until the PA stops inciting and subsidizing terrorism. Not only has a president's special envoy to the Middle East met with the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to discuss the progress of the legislation, an administration official is saying that the White House agrees with the high-level goals of the Taylor Force Act. There's been speculation that the White House was ambivalent about the bill since they've been so focused on restarting Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. But apparently that's not the case. The bill will be voted on in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee before the Senate recesses on August 22nd. It's named after Taylor Force, a U.S. Army veteran who was stabbed to death by a Palestinian terrorist in Tel Aviv. Now, history lovers, here's some interesting news. Archaeologists have found the remnants of a water system from the time of the Bible. That's 2,700 years ago. Eyal TV's Max Keisler has the story. Now, Max, what is this water system doing here?
Well, it's being dated to the period of the Assyrian colonization. This is a time when the indigenous population, the Israelites, had been deported or had fled, and the Assyrians were trying to keep the land productive to support their empire.
So is this where the tradition of the 10 lost tribes comes from?
Yes, this is the same time. When the Assyrians destroyed the kingdom of Israel, they deported a lot of the population to Assyria. It's kind of like how Stalin would send a population from, say, Ukraine to Uzbekistan. The idea is that once you've cut the population off from their homeland, they're more likely to adapt this imperial identity.
Interesting. All right, well, let's check out this report.
The discovery of a largely intact water system in central Israel is giving us a new look into the aftermath of the fall of the Kingdom of Israel. The reservoir was constructed by the Assyrians to irrigate the colonial farms on the western reaches of the Assyrian Empire. The Book of Kings tells of how the Assyrians rose up from the plains around the Tigris River to conquer the whole Middle East, from the Persian Gulf to the distant cities of Upper Egypt. The local kingdoms like Aram and Israel that fought against the kings of Ashur were destroyed. The empire had one purpose, to make the whole world bow to Ashur, the sun god, and if in the process they taxed smaller kingdoms to the point of starvation and grew rich off the spoils, well, that was proof of Ashur's strength. After the Assyrians destroyed the Kingdom of Israel and the native inhabitants were either deported to the east or fled south to their neighbors in Judah, the land was basically deserted, and deserted kingdoms don't pay taxes. So the Assyrians gave the lands of Israel to their own soldiers and settlers, and built this water system to grow crops and keep the money flowing. But with the rise of Babylon, the Assyrian Empire would fall into dust, leaving only the ruins.
Summer in Israel is always an amazing time full of festivals and special events. In just a week, Israel's annual animation festival called Anammox will be held in Tel Aviv. And joining us to tell us all of the details is Anammox production assistant Oded Naaman. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
This sounds like an event that I would really want to check out. I kind of think the nerd in me is coming out a little bit already. But what types of things can we expect at this festival?
Well, I think beyond just it's just a celebration of everything that's drawn. It's caricature, animation, comics, cartoons, everything that, as a profession, somebody comes and takes a pencil or a pen or something like that and draws. Absolutely. That's what we celebrate in this festival, and that was, from day one, our intention.
So are all of these animations coming from Israelis, or is this more of an international event?
So we have everything. So we're an international festival, so we have lots of guests coming from outside. This year we have Sam Viviano, who's the art director of Mad Magazine, coming in to talk about Mad and his career, and which has been very rich and fruitful. We have Cesar Coelho, who is the director of Anima Mundo, which is the biggest festival in Brazil and one of the biggest animation festivals in
Now,
America.
It's interesting that, I don't know that Israel is necessarily related that much to animation, right? But this is a center of a lot of animation. There are amazing films that have come out of this country that are at the top of animation, right? Like Waltz with Bashir is an example. I'm sure we can list a million more. Why, how is animation changing in this country, if at all? Well,
first of all, it's blooming these days. Like the amount of productions that are being done in-house and outsourcing outside is just amazing. We have a lot of studios, a lot of production going on. We have many, many animation schools and many, many animation programs that produce
which
industry
people
standard.
Probably wouldn't even know about that here.
Yeah,
in
I mean, people, if you want to go and study animation, when I went and studied animation, there were like maybe one or two worthwhile programs.
Interesting.
Right now, almost every program is worthwhile because the people who are teaching are just amazing. And those programs produce like every year, just top of the line animators, industry standard.
Wow. So what I'm interested in knowing is, for those of our viewers who are interested in checking out this super cool event, when and where is it going to be, and will there be more events like this one for the rest of the year? So
this event is happening 8 to 12 in August in Tel Aviv Cinematheque, which is our home for the past 17 years. And after that, each year we try and bring those programs to all kinds of places around the country.
Interesting.
Kiryat Yvon has kind of like a mini Anammox every year. We try to do it down south as well, and try kind of like people who can get to Tel Aviv or unable at the time to kind of like being exposed to all those programs as well beyond.
Very cool. Well, I mean, this is amazing to watch, and I'm excited to kind of see what other animations this country brings to the world stage. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
The British band Radiohead just played a concert in Tel Aviv last night, and it's almost as if they were trying to send a message to the BDS movement by holding their longest show in 11 years. Deep into the show, frontman Tom York even said, "We ain't done yet. We came all the way here. We're gonna play our fingers off." 47,000 fans crammed into the concert space to return the love, and tens of thousands more could be seen crowding the grassy park beyond the gates for a free listen. The past few months leading up to last night's performance have been marked by a public feud between Radiohead and prominent BDS supporter and Pink Floyd band member Roger Waters. Waters called on the band to boycott Israel and cancel their show, to which Radiohead frontman Tom York sparingly replied that he was insulted at the assumption they couldn't make their own decisions over where to play.
In a more recent comment, York further defended the show, saying that playing in Israel is no more a statement in support of Netanyahu and the Israeli government than it would be in support of Trump if and when they play in America. Then in last night's show, York said simply, "A lot of stuff was said about this. In the end, we played some music." The set list last night was 27 tracks long, the second longest in the band history, and ended with an extended and powerful rendition of their 1997 hit Karma Police.
Now, speaking of music, joining us in the studio is Eyal TV's Emmanuel Kadosh to give us a scoop on one of Israel's up-and-coming stars. Hi, Emmanuel.
Hi, yes. Well, I got the chance to meet Sabina. She is a German Jewish singer whose passion for singing actually came from a very unfortunate experience. But let's take a look at my report.
Looking out for a moment, living my troubled past, feeling like I'm a prisoner, running in my cage.
My genre of music is very emotional, very personal, very intimate. It's a travel between dark and light. When my father started to be ill of cancer, he actually called me up one day and said, "There's something wrong with me and you should really come." And it was very weird to me. My father is like the strongest guy and he would never call me up, "Come, I need you," kind of thing. So I went there, and one of the evenings we went to a restaurant, and there was a piano player, and I went up to him and I told him, "Listen, I really want to sing a song to my dad. I really want to do this." And he said, "Yes." And I was so surprised. And I sang to my dad, and he stood up and he just like hugged me for like 5 minutes, and there was like light, and I knew it was like, I knew it was like one of the most beautiful moments before he passed away. I always wanted to sing, but I didn't have that courage, and I think that moment gave me that courage, that I could reach out to my dad and make him so vulnerable at this moment. I am melting into ash. You're my world. I stand for my music, and I'm not gonna conform myself, not in style, not in the language. I think music is like global. So it's just something, if you come with your heart and your passion, it's gonna work. And it really doesn't matter what language. I want to reach out to people. Sounds amazing! I'm very excited about my new album. The album was done in the last year. Basically, the album reflects a lot about my personal life. It's about motherhood, it's about hope, it's about loss and relationships.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
Now for our Hebrew word of the day. Talent can't be taught, but it can be awakened. So today's word is kisharon, meaning talent. Either you have it or you don't, but here in Israel there are many people with a special kisharon, and some of them are great dancers or great chefs, but I think my favorite thing about Israelis is that no matter what, they all think that they have kisharon. Just remember, too much ego will kill your talent, and your kisharon means nothing if you don't know how to work hard. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 77 or 25 degrees Celsius. Over the weekend, you can expect partly cloudy skies with a return to warmer temperatures. The high will sit around 87 or 31 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.58 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at eyaltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.